Greetings, folks. So my theme is going to be things to study, things that are interesting. And you may not agree that these are either interesting or things you want to study, but it's a genre. It's kind of like show and tell, except instead of saying, I know all this stuff and I'm going to show about it and tell about it, it's more like, I don't know about this stuff and I'm planning to learn about it and sort of give a sense of a territory. And you might do something of this genre when you're trying to recruit like a study group, like, hey, who wants to dive into this stuff with me? And that's a useful sort of skill to have to recruit people to join you. Along those lines, I've been doing some recruiting and orientation video making. My most recent one was called Oregon Curriculum Network Orientation. And it's focusing on, quote, people just joining us, unquote. And that's an important technique because if you get really, really deep into something, then people don't know where to access and they also feel they're committing to a very long pipeline. Like when you say, have you watched Game of Thrones? Some people just roll their eyes, like where to begin? And if I'm really going to commit, do I, go into this thing for a long tunnel? What can I just do random access and get something out of it? And like Sesame Street and your average cartoon and so on, they're random access. You can get something out of it no matter almost what order. There's no real storyline. Like The Simpsons, each episode is pretty much self-contained, but against the backdrop of a bigger story too. So Simpsons does create a universe kind of like Isaac Asimov did. So I'm getting into the world of GraphQL is a long way of saying that this is something of interest. This is a no SQL or not SQL approach to both creating a schema and then querying it with a language. So I see it as somewhat of a successor to SQL in being a defined language. You're not just creating a database technology and throwing a language on as an afterthought. You're creating the language before you really create the databases, in fact. The implementations are what people keep coming up with. So I'm looking at, how they do it in the JavaScript world, how they do it in the Django world, which is a subculture of the Python world, and just the generic GraphQL client in Python called GQL. I haven't even installed that yet, so that tells you how at the beginning of all this I am. And what I've expressed an interest in past videos is, okay, let's use a NoSQL, let's use a graph database to study music history and things like that, like the punk and girl punk and what we've been getting into with Portland here, right, in Portlandia. We've been studying our music history in, I'd say, not a very deep way because we don't have an API to all this GraphQL stuff where the information is easy to get that I know of yet. And I'm not saying I'm going to build it either. I'm saying I just want to go against it with my queries at some point. Anyway, the other loose end or two I wanted to tie up. I've mentioned that I'm not a Zoom expert, so this is Zoom tool, and I've been looking at this in some recent videos and going, gee, this doesn't look right because these would all be the same length if we were talking about a regular jitterbug, right? Like, let me get the regular jitterbug. So this kind of, people think it's kind of, what is this anyway? What is this goofy thing? But there's a lot you can say about it in this cuboctahedral position in terms of the sphere packing, the CCP, Barlow packings in general, the randomness of it all, but always with that same 0.74 density, we could say, and then collapsed this much only, we're down to an icosahedron. And you can sort of intuit that the radii, the 12 radii to the corners, will have to shrink a bit when this happens. When it torques, the outer vertices transcribe a path that brings them closer to the center. So the radii are getting smaller, which means that this Zoom tool thing, if you can build an icosahedron with these two links, which you can, then you've proved what two links you're actually dealing with in reality with this thing. So I had that picture all queued up to show you. Where is it now? So these are all kind of things you can build with Zoom tool. Now with the greens, David Koski told me, and there are the greens there, you can do an actual true, what we might call a vector equilibrium, where all the internal spokes are the same as the circumferential spokes. So here you see what the reds are really. They're shorter. They're shorter than the blues by a small amount. Just wanted to make that clear. It was kind of a loose end in a couple other videos. I'm sure I have some other loose ends I could tie off around here. Remember, these magnetic cubes with edges square root of 2, face diagonals 2, in a checkerboard pattern are what we've been using as what we call a matrix or lattice. It's the beginning of our CCP lattice. So I recommend this educational supply as well as Zone. So keep a lookout, and we'll see you back here.